There's a moment in a man's path where creation begins to feel heavy. Not because he lacks passion, not because he's lost direction, but because everything he creates still has a tether to approval, to applause, to being seen. He calls it purpose, he calls it impact, he calls it mission, but underneath, he's still performing. Most men don't create to express, they create to exist, to stay visible, to stay significant, to prove in a quiet and constant way that they matter. And so their work becomes an identity loop, an energetic contract with the world. As long as I keep producing, you'll keep validating. But here's the truth. When performance becomes your creative engine, you will eventually burn out. Not from exhaustion, but from misalignment. Because the energy that fuels performance is not coherence, it's compensation. It's a man trying to build something outside of himself to prove he's complete inside. And that loop never ends. I've built from that energy myself. I've created platforms, programs, books, projects. They carried all the right language, but weren't clean in the field. They came from fire, not structure. And although they helped people, they drained me because I wasn't building from coherence. I was building from fragmentation. I wasn't building because it was true. I was building because it was timely, profitable, well-positioned, applauded. And even though the form looked powerful, the frequency was thin. Eventually I stopped, not because I gave up, but because I saw the truth. If I have to perform my purpose to feel like I'm living it, it's not my purpose, it's my prison. This is where the architect begins to create differently, not to be heard, but to hold resonance, not to be followed, but to transmit frequency, not to stay visible, but to become invisible structure. And that difference changes everything. The coherent man builds slowly, deliberately, elegantly, without urgency. He does not create from deficit. He creates from stillness, from overflow. He waits for the field to signal, not the market, not the audience, not the algorithm, the field. Because when the field is ready, creation becomes effortless. Not easy, effortless. It carries no friction, no static, no energetic residue. It simply moves through him and into the world, clean. That's how you know the difference between a project that's true and one that is performance. One leaves you more whole when it's done, the other leaves you emptier. You may have earned, but you've also spent yourself. Some people might call that sacrifice. You may have helped, but you've also bled internally. And the field around you begins to thin because you keep asking it to carry what it did not initiate. That is distortion, and distortion, no matter how noble, will always collapse. When the architect creates, he does not carry distortion, he carries signal. He speaks less often, but when he does, it moves tectonic plates because he's not creating content, he's anchoring coherence. And coherence, once embedded, alters the field for everyone it touches, not through logic, but through resonance. This is what creation becomes when it's no longer about proving. It becomes architecture. Form that holds, form that lives beyond you, form that doesn't depend on you being online, active, public, or popular. It simply exists like a mountain, a monument. It doesn't chase attention, it draws those who are ready. Most men don't trust this. They've been conditioned to believe that if they stop performing, they'll disappear. and become irrelevant. So they post every day, they market from emptiness, they keep launching things that their soul no longer believes in because their identity is married to output. And when output slows, their worth unravels, so they speed up and eventually they burn. Not dramatically, not always, mostly in silence. They wake up one morning and the thing they once loved to do feels like a job. That's the cost of performance. So what does creation without performance feel like? It feels like space. It feels like breath. It feels like silence, followed by sudden clarity. It feels like this is ready, not I have to. It doesn't need deadlines to justify its importance. It doesn't need launch plans to validate its existence. It arises naturally, coherently, completely. And when it lands, it holds because it came from the field, not the fire. This podcast is one of those things. There's no funnel, no campaign, no announcement, no plea to like and subscribe and share. It is simply presence. And when the presence is clear, the signal spreads, not virally, not with hype, but with gravity. That's what the coherent man carries, gravitational signal. He doesn't create for attention, he becomes the thing that attention orients itself around. And he does it quietly, because structure doesn't need noise, it only needs truth. So if you're building something right now and it feels heavy, pause, ask yourself, is this mine? Is this clean? Is this true? Would I still build this if no one saw it, if it never became popular, if it never paid me? Would I still build it just to honor the field? If the answer is yes, then keep going. If the answer is no, you must stop. Not because it's wrong, but because your signal deserves more. It deserves clarity. It deserves space. It deserves to emerge from you without being twisted into something it's not. The coherent man does not build for applause, he builds for eternity. His work may never trend, it may never scale, it may never go viral, it may never be admired by the masses, but it will last because it's real, because it's whole, because it did not come from the need to be seen, but from a decision to be still. And in that stillness, true creation happens. Welcome to The Architect Speaks.